It's Holocaust Remembrance Day today, with the hashtag Never Forget. And while a lot of people are posting about this, they're usually having the same old story of how the Capitol storming is somehow indicative of the Nazi and white supremacists' presence in our nation. And meanwhile, while they're acting like that is the primary threat, we have actual internment and isolation quarantine camps, a bill in New York, Bill 416, that is made to detain people who are not only people that have COVID, but really just any person deemed dangerous to public health, there's actual camps being created with vague for your health and safety types of verbiage on them. And then there was also detainee camps in Canada, Quebec. And for some reason, even when actual very creepy, terrifying, Nazi-esque stuff is actually happening, people are still focusing on this imaginary boogeyman of this hallucination that there's a monolith of Trump supporters and white supremacists who are the ultimate threat. And it's really hard to watch this because the people who are making a scapegoat in the name of saying these people are Nazis actually act like Nazis. Like, they have censored people, they have reduced everyone, and often they reduce white men to if you're not completely with liberal orthodoxy, then you must be with white supremacy. They have this either or paradigm of you're either with us or you're a Nazi. You're either with us or you're a white supremacist. And then they have that level of rigidity and that demonization and that dehumanization and othering a group, and yet they're not seeing the Nazi within them, the monster within them. And they're not seeing, there are actually orders to build COVID internment camps, detainee camps. And it's so scary and frightening because, again, we have this reality war. And the reality war, it's like all the people I know who have left the left did so because they saw the left as a red flag for seeming very fascist and Nazi-esque. And that's because they've noticed that with leftist orthodoxy, there's this religious fundamentalism, and then there's this tendency to demonize and dehumanize and other people in the name of being against othering. That's the irony that everyone except the left sees, is that in their pursuit of trying to eradicate the behaviors of othering and demonization and dehumanization, they are imitating the exploitive behaviors that they seek to eradicate. And they don't, you can talk in circles with them forever and they really won't see it. They'll be like, I am justified because I am just wanting to eradicate evil. And it's like, but what you're calling people evil who aren't actually white supremacists, racists, or Nazis. You are attaching that label as, and it's a harmful, problematic label over people who just, even people who are moderates, even people who are just normal right-wing, who are not Nazis, who are people who are libertarians, people who have left the left, people who are politically homeless. There's a huge group of people who have been maligned falsely for being something that they are not, as an excuse to then make them the scapegoat and have them a sense of otherness. Well, if we were to never forget, we would remember the totalitarian tiptoeing that happened with Hitler and the Jews went like this. He had them wear the Star of David to mark them as other. and then they were moved into different neighborhoods and in slums. They were segregated. Again, that's another form of othering them. And what slogan did they repeat throughout each step of the totalitarian tiptoeing? For your safety and protection. For your safety, for your health. Okay, that was what was repeated every step of the way. And it was a gradual lane of traffic thing. It wasn't just it wasn't abrupt. And we have to be identifying the ways not only the ways that we are being, the way that we are monsters and villains in our own story, but also the ways that we are othering people, and also the way that we are having this strange authoritarian tiptoe, totalitarian tiptoe. And then again, when the Jews were sent to the concentration camps, again, they were told, this is for your protection. These camps, we're going to call them concentration. That word, the emphasis of, it's not a camp. They should be called death camps. Again, coding, evil always coats what it's doing with altruism and with phrases that seem very rainbow and generic and wonderful. Or not wonderful, but they're never going to say, oh, these are kill camps, these are torture camps, these are mutilation camps. Did they say that? No. The thing is if you aren't able to start to recognize when we're tiptoeing in, then you have forgotten. So if you're going to say the phrase never forget, then maybe tune into the world right now. Tune into Canada, tune into Australia, and tune into New York, because they all have extremely, extremely problematic, horrific laws with detainee camps and with this complete overreach that if people are going to act like the threat is people are so caught up in, again, Trump still. Honestly, it's like you need to wake up and get out of this idea of thinking that man is the root of all evil, and also in thinking that he's the savior. He's a man, and he's honestly, we don't know. We need to focus on actual terribly problematic things that are happening. Regardless, there's many people that are involved and many people to be worried about. Okay, I'm sick of this obsession with. It's so simplistic with people being like, I'm so worried about the Trump supporters and the white supremacists. It's like, no, the Trump supporters, I mean, and then having that idea of demonizing and othering them, and then completely acting like the riots and looting of the summer were justified. I mean, there's so much, you've got to be against seeing violence and seeing totalitarianism, whatever side it's on. That's why I hate the far left and the far right, because they are actually the same collectivist authoritarians that are reducing people to identity and causing this and reducing people in that way that others them. Okay? If you think that you're othering somebody and that's okay because they're somebody that's othering you, like that is probably the most genius justification we've had in the past hundreds of years. Yes, because now you've really come up with a new one, a new spin on how to be a horrible person yourself, is to be like, well, these people are so horrible, so I have, no, you have to see and another example of othering that's happening that everyone just laughs at is the fact that, because it's normalized, is just making fun of white straight men. And that's just, ha ha ha. Well, of course, they act like, oh, you were not othering him because he's not, and he doesn't have privilege, he has privilege plus power. Okay, you're dehumanizing him. You're dehumanizing groups, and you're pretending like because you think you're the side of ultimate victimhood that you get to play that card, that you get to have the power to do that, which actually doesn't prove that you are in the victim-oppressor dynamic. It actually proves that you are going from oppressed to oppressor. So, but no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about that because they like to use their power play. They like to use their victimhood as a power play and as an excuse to be a very spiteful, vengeful human who demonizes and then dehumanizes people because they seem to think, well, I was demonized and dehumanized, so now I get to go do it. No, that's not, you're not adding any good in the world by becoming the monster that you say you're trying to eradicate. Do you understand that? You have definitely forgotten about the Holocaust if you think that having this attitude of censoring people that you don't want, that you don't like, and then having this big rationale, well, it's because they have hate speech, but me, when I'm doxing and censoring and calling and completely being the most cruel, I can't, it's like, oh, I'm completely incapable of, I have the moral superiority card because I'm a victim. No, you don't have that. You don't have that. The reason why people have left the left is because it is clear that the left has this level of fundamentalism and authoritarianism and totalitarianism that is reminiscent of the very Nazis that they claim that they are fighting against. And that's just one part of the puzzle that we're leading into why we haven't the Never Forget and Holocaust Remembrance Day. That's just one piece. The other piece is what we're dealing with since March 2020 and how that has been an obvious overreach, and how there's also been this kind of dehumanization by saying that, you know, the people who are anti-maskers, they've also become a scapegoat group associated with, they like to just associate everything as, of course, a selfish white male thing. Again, that's not what's happening. That's not the reality. That's the reality in the movie that you live in, where you're so obsessed with identity that you think that you are somehow fighting for the rights of minorities and fighting for the rights of having identity not be paramount, but you're making identity paramount, and you're perpetrating racism. You're perpetrating all the phobias that you discuss. You're perpetrating actual evil because you are so intent on dehumanizing people. And until you realize that it should be a relief to you when somebody says, actually, you know what? This monolith that you are convinced is evil, they're not. They're not all white supremacists, they're not all racist, and they're not this big scapegoat that you have to make them. And there's even proof of that. I mean, then that person might go into, well, you know, the fine people hoax. Okay, what people use as their rationale for the white supremacy narrative is they say that Trump called both the neo-Nazis and the other people fine people. He was actually talking, here's the actual quote. He said, there are fine people on both sides, and I don't mean the neo-Nazis and white supremacists, because they should be condemned entirely. I meant the two people on the sides of advocating for tearing down statues and advocating for keeping them up. Okay, that's the actual full transcript. That's the actual fact. This isn't a lie I made up. I don't have any vested interest in proving that Trump is good or bad. I'm just giving you the actual fact and how it was used to manipulate your point of view. Your point of view has been continually manipulated. And then you'll say, well, the Capitol riots. The Capitol riots, again, you've added the lens of saying that those were racist white men. They were mad about the election, and they were dressed up weird, and they were violent, and they were horrible, and they should be condemned. But again, you're adding the lens of this idea that there's white supremacists and racists. And there are there's probably like 2,000 probably. And they probably, I bet the person that's actually riled them up to make them more empowered isn't Trump. I bet it's actually your leftist identity politics, because your identity politics is actually conducive to their identity politics. They want to reduce everything to identity, so do you. So, okay, we've got all that. Now, we've got all of that going on with this fight and acting like never forget. Then we've got what's happened since March 2020. Another thing that we don't hear about, which would be actually a perfect ideal left argument, is, well, Bill Gates has a eugenicist family. So he's he's sleeping with Nazis. His whole ideology of population control and his value system is the exact horrific stuff that the Nazis believed. So I'm so confused as to why you have to have the mental gymnastics to keep everything in your neat little labels and groups of who's evil and who's good, and then you just kind of are, well, I don't want to really think about Bill. Well, you better start thinking about him, because he's a part of the agenda with what's happened since March 2020 and what's going on with this year and the injections. I mean, there's such you got to look into, things that were normalized, like lobotomies used to be normalized. It used to be unacceptable to say that they were horrific. And cigarettes too, but let's actually talk about lobotomies. You've got to start realizing that when people are raising observations about worrying about what's happened since March 2020, and when they're raising observations about the media manipulation, and when they're raising concerns and observations about, the reminiscence of the left and of the authoritarianism to Nazism, it's not because we're trying to other you. We are actually scared about it. And that's why what you're not seeing, because you're so caught up in this weird savior, I'm a social justice warrior narrative, where you're the hero in your story, is you're not seeing all these other things going on. You're being distracted by what's a fake movie and a fake fight. That if you realize, actually, no, we are all people that could unite against the evil of this totalitarian tiptoe, and of the people that want to use rage and spite as a rationale to do harm. We could actually all unite and get this out, get this never forget message, and never let it happen again. We would be able to do that if we were not mired in this kind of false divide and conquer agenda. If we were not mired in our obsession with having to keep who we think is the true enemy and scapegoat as evil, if we opened our mind to realize that actually it's a relief to know that the people that supported Trump are not a bunch of, I know it's hard to go against the programming of 5 years now, but they're not a bunch of hicks, they're not a bunch of racists, they're not a bunch of white supremacists. That's a story that's been spoon-fed to you very well. And there's also a lot of people who have left the left because of your behavior. It's like telling somebody that keeps being like, I don't know why everyone leaves me. Well, everyone's leaving you because you are volatile. So people have left the left, and they're in the fight it's really about the fight really for freedom versus being authoritarianism, for being told what to do. The people that want to be told what to do, and the people that want to live and let live. This is not about the left or right, because there's new labels put on based on what horrific things are going on. When we have this overreach since March of last year, and when we have this upcoming detainee camps that are being built, and laws, check out the New York Bill 416. When we have this kind of stuff going on, it's time to get out of these kind of petty, spiteful, little spoon-fed narratives, and realize there's an actual really terrifying, looming, actual evil snake that's happening while you're all fighting with each other. And just realize that we need to be focused on that, and keeping, or we're going to easily forget. I think people have forgotten so easily, because what they're not seeing is that they're actually the person in the story who is just letting it kind of happen, and it's kind of gradually happening, and then by the time it really gets bad, they'll be filled with shame, but they're not going to speak up. No, you're not. They're not there. That's the people that we need to talk to. We're not going to try to convert sociopaths. We're not going to try to convert people that are really filled with spite and resentment and othering, because they're already too far gone. This is really for convincing you, the people that are kind of passive and inactive and kind of scared, but you don't really know why, and you're scared of the left, you're scared of the right, you're scared of the media, you're just kind of just trying to live your life, and you don't even know maybe all the context and terrifying things going on. But you just got to realize that what's being normalized, what the popular ideas of today are, do not indicate that they are right. And just like lobotomies were an acceptable way of medical practice, you've got to rethink, why are some of these injections, why are they an acceptable form? Why are we rushing into this? Why do we have so much overreach in this particular time and with this particular sickness? And why what is really going on here? Why do we have a known eugenicist being part of the messaging and trying to convince us to get it? Why is there such a push to get it in the first place? And realize that when there's that smugness of how you're on the right side of history, if you're somebody that espouses something that's really popular, and that the media and the academia and everything is the popular, really dominant views of society, you're in and normalized views of society, you're not on the right side of history, because you have only ego to say that. It is so egocentric to assume that, when you are not seeing what other people see and what other people truly fear within you, is that you are imitating the exploitive behaviors that you seek to eradicate. You are fighting prejudice with prejudice. You are fighting demonization and dehumanization with demonization and dehumanization, and with presumption. And so be careful of the monster that you're creating in yourself. And that means whether you're being passive to the leftist orthodoxy or to the authoritarian overreach. If you're passive to either of those things, even though you're because you're so scared of the kind of mob of both, then you're the person I'm talking to. Realize that we want to never forget. It's Holocaust Remembrance Day. There are camps being built. There's scary stuff going on that is truly horrific. So if you want to actually rise up, I think you've got to start using your voice. Get out of this kind of heavy diet of what the media tells you, and start getting curious. Look for alternative beliefs and stories, and look for truth. Look for truth over comfort. Look for truth over ego, and fight for that truth. Fight for that truth, and fight for the justice and integrity over perpetrating this kind of fight and kind of thinking that it will keep you safe. Like, staying apathetic will not keep you safe. It will actually give you a lot of guilt and shame later.